The polished chrome of the skyscraper reflected a city that was his to conquer. Or so he thought for 5 years. This view, from his corner office, had been a testament to his rise. Alex Mercer was not just successful, he was a phenomenon, a self-made man who had clawed his way out of a dusty Texas town and built a tech empire from a single brilliant idea. He stood there feeling the plush carpet. Beneath his Italian shoes, the city lights just beginning to wink on in the early winter. Dusk, his empire was secure, his future brighter than the Manhattan skyline. And at the center of it all was the one person he trusted. Implicitly his brother, not by blood but by bond. Julian Finch. Julian was the first person Alex had met at college, a scrawny kid with a calculator and a nervous smile. They had been two halves of a whole. Alex the visionary, the front man with the bold ideas and magnetic charm. Julian the quiet genius, the architect, who could translate those ideas into complex code and flawless business plans. They started Ethel Technologies in a garage, surviving on raiment and ambition. They had celebrated every milestone together. The first million, the first major client, the IPO that made them both obscenely wealthy. Julian was his best man. When Alex married Chloe, the rock in his life. When his father passed away, Alex never made a major decision without Julian. He trusted him with the company, with his life, with everything. He had the betrayal, therefore, was not a simple corporate theft. It was a meticulously planned annihilation. It happened on a Tuesday. Alex was preparing for the launch of their new project, Chimera, a revolutionary AI security system that was set to redefine the industry. It was their masterpiece, years in the making. He was in his office, going over his keynote speech, when his assistant buzzed her. Voice strained. "Mr. Mercer, there's a problem. With the Chimera servers, the entire system is down." Alex felt a prickle of alarm, but not panic. Julian would handle it. He tried Julian's line. It went straight to voicemail. That was odd. He strode out into the main office. The energy was wrong. The usual hum of productivity was replaced by a tense silence. People were gathered around screens, their faces pale. The stock, he heard someone whisper. He didn't understand until he saw the ticker himself. Ethel Technologies stock was in freefall, plummeting 60% in minutes. Then his phone started to ring. First a frantic call from his head of finance, then a board member, then a news alert. Ethel Technologies CEO Alex Mercer accused of massive securities fraud and embezzlement. His world tilted. He stared at the screen, seeing his own face next to headlines that screamed fraud, criminal, mastermind. The article was damning. It laid out a complex scheme of funneling company funds into offshore accounts, all traced back to him with digital fingerprints he couldn't dispute. There were fabricated emails, doctored financial statements, a trail of evidence so perfect it could only have been planted by someone with total access to the company's core systems. Someone like Julian. He ran to Julian's office. It was empty. The desk clean, the family photo he kept gone. It was then he knew the chill that seeped into his bones was colder than any winter wind. He heard footsteps behind him, turning to see two stern-faced men in dark suits. "FBI, Mr. Mercer, you need to come with us." The fall was swift and brutal. The evidence was overwhelming. His assets were frozen, his reputation shredded by the media frenzy. Chloe stood by him, at first her faith a flickering candle in the storm, but as the walls closed in, as their friends vanished and the legal bills mounted, even her belief began to crumble. He saw the doubt in her eyes when she read the news reports, the hesitation in her voice when she told him she believed him. The final blow came not from the courts but from her. She left a note on the kitchen counter. "I can do this, Alex. I don't know what to believe anymore. I'm going to stay with my sister. Please don't contact me." He read it standing in the empty penthouse. They had bought together, a symbol of their shared dream, now just a cavern of echoes. He was alone, completely and utterly alone. His trial was a spectacle. The prosecution painted him as a greedy wolf who had devoured his own company to feed his lavish lifestyle. They presented the flawless digital evidence. The jury didn't take long to deliberate. The word guilty echoed in the courtroom, a death knell for his old life. He was sentenced to 15 years in a federal penitentiary. Prison was a different kind of hell, a brutal education in survival. The man, Alex Mercer, the tech titan, the visionary, was stripped away layer by layer, leaving only a number and a burning core of hatred. He learned to fight, to keep his head down, to observe the world was a jungle and he was just another predator now. But he was a predator with a mind. He spent his time in the library reading Everything he could about finance, about cybersecurity, about human psychology. He made connections: a forger with an artist eye, a hacker doing time for embarrassing the Pentagon. He built a new network, not of friends but of assets, each man a tool. For a future purpose, he thought of Julian every day, not with sadness but with a cold, focused rage. Julian hadn't just taken his company, his money, his freedom. He had taken his name, his honor, his life. That debt would be repaid. The plan began to form in the shadows of his cell. It wasn't about getting revenge, it was about achieving justice, his own kind of justice. He would take everything from Julian, just as Julian had taken everything from him. He would expose him for the traitor he was, and he would reclaim what was his. After 10 years with good behavior, he was released, a ghost, stepping back into a world that had moved on without him. He was thinner, harder. His eyes held a flat, cold light that hadn't been there before. He had nothing but the clothes on his back and a small sum of money from a prison release program. His first stop was a public library. He logged onto a computer and began his research. Julian Finch was now a billionaire, living in a San Francisco mansion. He was a celebrated philanthropist, a tech visionary, the man who had saved Ethel Technologies from collapse after the disastrous reign of Alex Mercer. The company had pivoted under his leadership and was more powerful than ever. The irony was a bitter pill. Julian had built his new empire on the ashes of the one he had betrayed. Alex felt the old rage ignite, but he banked it. He needed to be cold and precise. His first move was to find Chloe. He tracked her to a small town in Oregon. She had remarried a quiet man who ran a bookstore. She had a child, a little girl with bright eyes. When he saw her from across the street, something in him fractured. It wasn't jealousy, it was a profound sadness for the life that had been stolen from them. He didn't approach, he just watched for a moment, then turned away. She had found her peace. He would not be the one to shatter it. His war was with Julian. Alone, he needed resources. He needed a new identity. He used his prison connections to get fake documents, a driver's license, a social security number. He became Alexander Black, a quiet, unassuming man looking for work in the tech sector. He used his knowledge honed over a decade of study to land a low-level IT job at a security firm. It was boring work, but it gave him access to systems and a paycheck. He lived in a single-room apartment, saving every penny. His old skills were rusty, but they came back quickly. He started small, hacking into low-level databases, building his tools. He targeted Julian's world, not directly, but from the edges. He needed a weakness, a crack in the armor. He found it in an old project file from the early days of Ethel, a project called Janus. It was a backdoor security protocol. They had developed together a failsafe. Julian had always been paranoid about system failures. Janus was his masterpiece, a piece of code so elegant and hidden it could bypass any firewall. Alex had forgotten about it, but Julian, the meticulous planner, would have kept it. He would have integrated it into the very heart of Ethel's current systems. It was his signature, his arrogance, a ghost in the machine that only Alex knew how to haunt. Finding it was the challenge. Ethel's security was legendary, but Alex had an advantage. He had helped design its core principles, and he knew the architect's mind better than anyone knew himself. He spent months probing, planning, mapping the digital fortress that was Ethel's network. He worked from the shadows, using a chain of anonymous servers across the globe. He finally found it, a whisper of code buried deep within the central server farm, a digital footprint that was unmistakably Julian. The Janus key was still there. Julian had never deactivated it. His arrogance was his undead. He had kept his master key, believing no one else knew it existed. Alex now had a way in, but he needed more than access. He needed leverage. Julian was too powerful to take down with a single hack. He needed to orchestrate a collapse as total as the one he had endured. He began to siphon money, not a lot, just tiny fractions of cents from thousands of transactions, a modern-day version of the salami slicing. Fraud, he was accused of. It was slow, patient work. The money was funneled through a series of shell companies and crypto wallets, eventually accumulating into a substantial war chest. He used it to fund the next phase. He needed to get inside Ethel physically. His IT job was a dead end. He needed a position at the company itself, using his new identity in a carefully crafted resume that highlighted Just enough skill to be appealing but not enough to raise flags. He applied for a mid-level systems analyst position at Ethel. He aced the interviews. His knowledge was inherent, his understanding of their systems innate. They hired him. Walking back into Ethel headquarters was the hardest thing he had ever done. The lobby was different, sleeker, but the smell, the energy, the sound of ambition was the same. He kept his head down, did his work, was competent, but forgettable. He observed, he learned, he saw Julian once from a distance. He was giving a tour to some foreign dignitaries. He looked older, richer, impeccably dressed. The nervous kid from the garage was gone, replaced by a polished corporate titan, but Alex saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his smile never quite reached his eyes. The man was living in a gilded cage of his own making. Alex continued his work from the inside, planting digital traps, gathering information. He accessed personnel files, financial projections, internal emails. He learned everything about Julian's life, his schedule, his habits, his weaknesses. Julian was a creature of routine. He left the office at 7 p.m. sharp every day. He worked out with a private trainer. At 6 a.m. every morning, he had a mistress, a young executive named Isabel, a secret he kept well hidden from his wife and the press. Alex stored this information away, each piece a potential weapon. His master plan was simple. He would use the Janus key to trigger a catastrophic system failure during Ethel's biggest annual product launch, an event that would be broadcast live to the world. But instead of just crashing the system, he would frame Julian. He would plant a trail of evidence showing that Julian was embezzling funds on a massive scale and planning to disappear. He would mirror the betrayal of a decade ago perfectly. The day of the launch arrived. The air in the Ethel headquarters crackled with anticipation. Julian was in his element, surrounded by reporters and adoring employees preening in the spotlight. Alex sat at his terminal, a ghost in the machine. He felt a strange calm, the years of planning, the hatred, the pain, all distilled into this moment. He initiated the sequence. The Janus key unfolded like a dark flower, granting him godlike access to the core systems. He began the transfer, siphoning millions into an account he had set up in Julian's name with digital that pointed unequivocally to the CEO. Simultaneously, he planted a series of damning emails and financial documents in a hidden folder on Julian's personal server, easy enough for the investigators to find. Then he triggered the fail-safe. The main presentation screen at the launch event flickered and died. A murmur ran through the crowd. Julian's smile faltered as technicians scrambled behind him. Then the screen came back on, but it wasn't the product demo. It was a live feed of the internal transaction log showing money flowing from Ethel into an offshore account under Julian Finch's name. The crowd gasped confusion, turning to shock. Then the screen changed again, showing the doctored emails between Julian and a fictional Swiss bank manager discussing his escape plan after the company's collapse. Chaos erupted. Journalists started shouting. Cameras flashed. Julian stood frozen on stage, his face a mask of stunned horror. He was trying to speak, but no words came out. He looked out at the sea of accusing faces, and his eyes for a fleeting second met Alex from across the room. In that moment, Julian saw not the face of Alexander Black, the anonymous employee, but the ghost of Alex Mercer, the man he had condemned to hell. He knew in that instant he had lost everything, just as Alex had. The fallout was even more spectacular than the first time. The stock tanked. The board fired Julian immediately. The SEC and the FBI launched investigations. The evidence was overwhelming. The digital trail was perfect. Julian's protests of a setup fell on deaf ears. Who would believe a man who had built his fortune on the ruins of his best friend's betrayal? The irony was not lost on the media in any way that mattered to him. Yet the victory felt empty. The man who had wanted revenge was the man he had been 10 years ago. That man had died in prison. The man he was now was a product of that betrayal, a creature of shadows and calculation. He had gotten everything he wanted, and it meant nothing. The hole that Julian had carved into his soul was still there, a void that revenge could not fill. One evening, he saw a news alert on his phone. Julian Finch had been found guilty on all counts, sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. Alex closed the browser. He looked out at the vast, indifferent ocean. He was free. He was rich. He was clear of the past, but he was Alone the fire that had sustained him for a decade was gone, leaving only cold ashes he had destroyed his enemy, and in the process he had finally destroyed the last remnant of the man he used to be. Alex Mercer was truly gone, and all that was left was the ghost he had become.